Coming to you live from the Cultural Hall, this is the Mormon News Report for the week of January 8th, 2018. We are your weekly dose of Mormonism.
As always, we're here with a healthy dose of snark that, frankly, considering the mood I'm in tonight, I'm probably going to put everybody on blast because there is a legitimate mountain of Mormon news stories that happens. And whenever this happens, I begin to hate everybody across the spectrum. So, Brian, as you and I were talking earlier, the salt is strong, the snark is strong. We've got so much stuff to get into, specifically a major Mormon news story. So let's dispense with the niceties and get into it. What do you think?
Can I start off with my cheesy salt joke, though, please?
Oh, boy. Here we go.
So those who are on a low-sodium diet, please consult your doctors before listening further, as the salt content in this episode is going to be high.
Oh, boy.
So, hey, welcome back. This is our brand new first episode of the new year.
It's been a while. We took a break. We did the top Mormon news stories of the year. But, you know, it was nice to get a break from doing the podcast every week. I don't think people really, not that I want to be a martyr, but I don't think people understand like the prep that goes into it and the fact that every Sunday night for me and you, the show is our life and our families kind of get put on hold. So it was nice to spend the holidays with them.
Well, and we ended up with a 25 straight week run, which that was a marathon run, in my opinion.
So what's going to happen with this latest run that we're doing? Are we going to go another 25 weeks?
Oh, no. If we do that, I'm going to kill myself. No, I think we're going to take a quarterly break at this point. So I think we're going to run 10 episodes per season, and then we'll take a break for a couple of weeks after that.
I'd be good with that.
All right. So as long as our lovely listeners and our Patreon supporters are okay with that, that's what we're going to do, because we have lives and, you know, spouses and children and work and all that stuff. So anyway, good to have you back, Brant. And on this episode, we are going to be bringing in the woman, the myth, the legend, Geraldine Hassel-Poole. She's going to be snarking it up with us about her Safe Christmas program, a new game that she's created, and I don't know, maybe her marriage and life with Jeffrey Poole.
This is going to be pretty epic. So Geraldine has actually been a little bit sick. Geraldine has also been taking a little bit of medicine, and she's also a little salty. So buckle up. That's all I can say is buckle up.
So we told Geraldine up front that this is a family-friendly show and that we try to keep the swears down, but I'm just going to give you a little heads up. We can't control what comes out of her mouth.
There's no guarantee for anything when she comes on.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to having her on. I think this is going to be just the kick in the pants that we need to start off this new year.
Consider it the gasoline that's poured on the fire of the Mormon News Report podcast.
We're not going back into gaslighting.
No, we're not doing that anymore. Oh, okay. I forgot. That was
that's a trigger word for me.
That was so 2017.
Right.
So,
exactly.
let's just move on from there.
All right. So the last question that we threw out, we're just going to breeze over it because it wasn't really meant to spark a discussion. It was more just soliciting audience feedback. The question that we had asked was, what do you prefer from us? Do you prefer that we do book reviews, author interviews, both, neither? Just stick with the news. Like, what do you want from us? And Brant, what was the general tone of the responses that we got?
First of all, I think it was very positive. Most people actually wanted a little bit of both. I actually had someone reach out to me on Twitter and say that 3 of the books that we recommended, either through book reviews, some of the smaller ones that we've done, or author interviews, they actually purchased those for other people. And Brian, I think for you and I, that is a high compliment that we take, because if we are going to recommend a book or we're going to talk to someone, we want to bring something new and interesting out there that maybe people haven't heard before. And I think that's where we want to go. But what I was seeing was that there was a lot of people who actually liked a little bit of both. Maybe if there's some interesting authors, we'll bring them on, we'll talk with them. Or if there's some books out there that people might be intrigued with, yeah, let's just talk about those. I don't know what you're like, Brian. I know that for me, I'm personally always adding books to my Amazon wish list. And for family, it makes it really easy to go through and look and say, oh, okay, those are some easy things to buy for a birthday or a Christmas gift. So I think that's kind of where we want to go with it. Let's review some books if we got them, and let's interview some authors if we got them. But it sounds like it's pretty good.
Yeah, I think we're going to just be a little more relaxed about it and not stress out so much if we don't have an author interview every single week, right? So if we've got authors to interview and we've got books that they're putting out, or we've got other people to interview, not necessarily just authors, we'll bring them onto the show. But there may be some shows where we just talk about a book briefly, and that's all that we do.
Listen, even if we don't even have that, Brian, we could always go back to interviewing you. That'll be fun. or we could just bring Geraldine back on. So there's, we got options.
Boy, we'll see what happens after night if we ever want to bring Geraldine back on. All right. So why don't we just get on with the news, because we've got a ton to cover this week.
So everyone, I'm just going to forewarn you. We're going to hit some news stories really, really quickly. And obviously, as all of you are probably well aware, President Thomas S. Monson of the LDS Church passed away this past week. And so we're going to spend a lot of time getting into that, because there is, Brian, not to spoil everything that we're going to get into, but I remember the death of President Hinckley. I was still in college at the time, and I didn't see as much conversation and traction on the death of President Hinckley as we did with President Monson. I think we want to make sure that we spend some time on that. So let's get into some of the quick things that you might need to know about for this week. For example, Utah Valley University President Matthew Holland, son of Jeffrey R. Holland, has received his LDS mission call to North Carolina. He's going to be starting his post as a president of the North Carolina Raleigh Mission on July 1st. And that is when all mission presidents start their new term, I guess you could call it, or their new calling. So he's going to be there. He's obviously going to be leaving his post at Utah Valley University, but it's something that people might want to be aware of. And who knows, maybe there might be a little bit of general authority grooming that's beginning to go on, especially with getting a mission call as young as he is.
Well, and we had also discussed when this story first came out whether or not he might be a political candidate for Utah. I think, was it gubernatorial that he was looking at, possibly, or representative? Not sure which. Anyway, we were talking about whether or not the mission call would interfere with that. If and there was just some speculation as to is he going to take the mission call? Is he going to go into the political arena? We don't know. I mean, obviously he's a Holland. He's going to take the mission call, for crying out loud.
Right. And really, I think what we were looking at was there were two divergent paths that Matthew could be taking, either the path into politics or the path into potentially the LDS Church and potentially rising through their hierarchy. I'm not saying that that's exactly where he's going, but I think that by choosing to be a mission president, A, it's no surprise, and B, I think you see the path that he's taking, mostly because he might be a little too old or miss out on some great opportunities if he were to serve in this post. So that's that. The Fundamentalist LDS Church, the FLDS Church that was formerly headed by Warren Jeffs, their church leaders are being sued for ritualistic child sex abuse. And let me put a content warning in here. There is going to be some stuff that I'm going to read from this article that might be disturbing for some listeners, specifically if you have any sort of trauma in your past or if you have children in the car or however you listen. On Wednesday, December 27th, a 21-year-old woman known only by the initials RH filed a lawsuit in state court accusing the FLDS church leaders Warren Jeffs, the Latter brothers Lyle and Seth Jeffs, and former church leader Wendell Nielsen of sex abuse. According to RH, she'd been made to wear a bag over her head before being taken from her home and brought to an unknown place. There, Nelson and the Jeffs brothers would remove her clothes and sexually abuse her while others watched. The abuse happened 5 or 6 times a week when she was 8 years old until she turned 14. RH also said she was instructed to record the abuse of other girls. So this was a lawsuit that was filed in court, Brian. I mean, absolutely horrific. I hope that more gets investigated into this. Who knows, maybe with some of this Me Too movement that's beginning to happen and women feeling more empowered to tell some of their stories and come out with some of their stories, maybe we'll see this in the FLDS Church. And if that's the case, I mean, go after them with the full power of the law, because this is... I don't know how to describe it. It's not surprising, but the fact that makes it even more shocking is the fact that it's not surprising considering some of the stuff that goes on within that group.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the Jeffs vehemently deny these claims. Probably are stating that they're drummed up to damage reputation, whatnot. But this kind of stuff always needs to be taken seriously. And in this case, in this case, I'm thinking that there's got to be something there. I have a feeling that if it's getting brought up in court like this and a lawsuit's being filed, it's not just stuff that's being thrown against the wall, and right,
especially going after them. So here's another story that came out this past week, and again, this is all kind of wrapping up 2017 and getting into 2018. Matt Martinich over at Cumorah, who does a lot of interesting work looking at LDS growth trends, published this: the top 10 most encouraging and the top 10 most discouraging LDS growth and missionary development in 2017. So I won't get into all 10, but let's get into some of the good. Some of the good. West Africa continues to grow. LDS growth rates in West Africa have begun to more closely mirror the church's rapid growth experience in Latin America and the Philippines during the last quarter of the 20th century, but with higher convert retention and member activity rates and greater regional self-sufficiency in leadership and missionary manpower. And I think those last parts of those sentences are key. They're retaining the people and they're developing those to be able to serve in leadership capacity and be self-sufficient instead of having to bring in other people, whether they're Americans or people who could, missionaries or whoever, which is a big key.
Well, and it sounds like they've gotten away from the practice of baseball baptisms.
Right. And I mean, come on, it's about time. You know what I mean? And who knows, maybe, not that I want to say that the baseball baptisms were good, but maybe that was a really difficult growing trend, that they're growing phase that they need to go through to realize, yeah, these baseball baptisms, while the numbers are going to look good on paper, it really just destroys the church in whatever area you're in, because you're not building up anything. You don't have anybody to sustain what you've got.
Should we briefly explain baseball baptism for the listeners who are like, what the heck is that?
Sure. So baseball baptisms were something that were kind of popularized in places like Latin America, where they would take a baseball team and say, hey, let's go play baseball. Hey, before we go play baseball, we got to go do this thing. And they would just baptize a mass group of people. There really wasn't any teaching involved. There wasn't any efforts at retaining them involved. I served my mission in South Korea, and it kind of happened a little bit in South Korea, not to the extent of Latin America. And I think that's, I don't hear about it very often. Am I doing it justice to baseball?
Yeah, it's like, before we hit into the baseball field, into the diamond, let's walk through this pool, right, and just make sure that everybody gets completely submerged underwater.
If you want to be part of the team, you got to do this. And
exactly.
Oh, hey, by the way, we got to walk here. So here's another one. Stake and congressional growth in certain Latin American countries are continuing to improve and get better. I know that this has been something that the church has been concerned about for the last, I'd say probably about 10 years. The fact that Latin America was starting to not only plateau, but starting to go down in certain areas. So the fact that stake and congregational growth is getting better there is a positive thing. Here's another one. The second largest number of new stakes were created in a single year since 1998, which is interesting.
I know that there were some stake consolidations that took place, particularly in Latin America. It sounds like it's starting to level off.
Yep. So here's the not so good. LDS growth rates in the United States continue to decelerate in 2017 as part of a trend of slowing growth that began approximately 15 years ago. So the reason why I like Matt and what he does is he analyzes this on a really good level. And Matt really tries to take a step back and look at things from a much broader perspective to say, how does this fit in? So on the one hand, yeah, that doesn't sound good that the United States is continuing to decelerate, especially considering, I don't want to be too United States centric, but especially considering the money that comes in from the United States as far as helping the church to be self-sufficient as far as tithing goes. I don't think that it's necessarily right, but the fact that we're pulling so many general authorities from places like the United States, it's something to be said. The church in Mexico reported a net decrease of 29 congregations in 2017, the largest decline in the number of wards and branches ever reported in the history of the church in Mexico. I'm not sure what's going on in Mexico, but that is something interesting to take into consideration as well.
Just a real quick, what would you say? Just a trivial fact. Today, January 7th, when we're recording this episode, is actually the anniversary of the first time Mormon missionaries ever entered into Mexico.
Go figure. That's a juicy little nugget there, Brian. And here's one, and this should be no surprise to anybody. Overall, there have been no measurable LDS growth that appeared to occur in Europe during 2017. Only the church in Albania has appeared to achieve significant progress within the past couple of years. And I think that's I don't know. I've heard rumors that certain general authorities and members of the Quorum of the 12 have basically said that Europe is dead. They're just not getting any growth there at all. But and this is something that I'll put a link to Matt's. They call it a case study in the show notes. But one of the things that does stand out to me is I wonder how this compares, and I wasn't able to read into this too much, but I wonder how it compares to just overall religious growth rates in places like Europe. It wouldn't surprise me if it is not only comparable, it also wouldn't surprise me if maybe the church was doing a bit worse.
Yeah. I mean, definitely it's from what I've seen from Pew studies and whatnot, this isn't shockingly low from a comparative religious standpoint. It seems to be the general trend throughout Europe, particularly Western Europe, the United States. Now, Albania was an interesting surprise to me, though, that it achieved some significant progress. And I'm not sure if it's because of political regiment changes there and people just becoming more publicly actively religious. I'm not sure, but that's an interesting one from my perspective.
So you had your little interesting nugget and tidbit. Here's my little personal anecdote. When I was going to college at BYU, Idaho, I worked in their reading center working with both ESL students and students who had reading disabilities. I was brought in specifically because I had a lot of experience with teaching English to Koreans, and they had a sizable Korean population at BYU, Idaho. The interesting other group that they had a sizable population was Albanians. And so this would have been, 2006 through 2009 is when I was there. So I'm not sure if that plays a factor as well. The fact that we saw so many Albanians coming in through BYU Idaho, and the fact that the church is doing well in Albania. Now, granted, that was 2017 only, and I've been out of college for 8 years now. So take it with a grain of salt, but it is an interesting little.
I think it was because they were on their way to Paris, so they thought, but they ended up in Paris, Idaho.
I mean, if you don't understand English very well, you might sit there and go, what's that? I don't know.
Or maybe Moscow.
Yeah.
Could have been Moscow.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Orrin Hatch made an announcement.
Yeah, this was one thing that I don't think that we were surprised at, but it's like, oh, okay, it finally happened. Merry belated Christmas to some of you. Orrin Hatch is going to retire from the United States Senate and open a path for Mitt Romney. This is from the New York Times. Senator Orrin G. Hatch of Utah, the longest-serving Senate Republican, announced Tuesday that he would retire at the end of the year, rebuffing personal pleas from President Trump to seek an 8th term and paving the way for Mitt Romney, a critic of Mr. Trump's, to run in the seat. Something, white horse, something, by a thread, something. Mitt Romney's political ascent is particularly alarming to the White House because the former presidential candidate has an extensive political network and could use the Senate seat as a platform to again seek the nomination. Even if he were not to run again for president, a Senator Romney could prove a pivotal swing vote impervious to the entreaties of a president he has scorned and able to rally other Trump skeptics in the chamber. Brian, it has been such a long time since we've gotten into serious mittens discussion, but wow, this is kind of a big thing. And I think, like we talked about before we went on break, Mitt Romney's going to have like the ultimate job security in a place like Utah. You know that he's going to get just an abnormally large amount of the vote.
Yeah.
From people who not only have fondness because he's LDS, but also because of what he did with the Salt Lake City Olympics. Plus, he's not been very shy about going after Donald Trump. So now you're looking at this going, oh, this could get quite juicy. This could be really interesting to watch.
Well, and I mean, because of Mitt Romney's prior presidential aspirations, he's pretty much a celebrity at this point, and particularly in Utah and particularly among Mormons. So, I mean, I've seen some people out there saying, hey, this is an opportunity to try to get a Democrat elected in Senate for Utah. And I'm going, really? Against Mitt Romney? I mean, let's be a little bit realistic here, folks. As much as I would like to see some more political diversity come out of Utah, putting them up against a celebrity political figure like Mitt Romney, yeah, not going to happen.
No, I think in a place like Utah, I mean, you'd have to do extremely well in a place like Salt Lake City, but even still, doing well in Salt Lake City is not going to overcome the rest of Utah. And it'd have to be almost almost like a blue dog or a Southern type Democrat that's going to be conservative on quite a few things and maybe Democratic or left leaning when it comes to government. But that's about it.
No, it would be a tough stretch just to have the political label going up against a contender like Mitt Romney. So, the good news is that Mitt Romney, since his 2008, 2012 presidential elections, I think has really shown a different public face. He's really matured, and he's kind of come out a little bit more strongly on things that perhaps he was a little bit more gun shy about when he was running. I actually really enjoy every time he throws out a tweet. I actually get a little bit of enjoyment reading what he has to say, and usually I'm like, yes.
So it warms the deep, dark cockles of your heart.
Yeah, the jaded political cockles of my heart.
Listen, I really do think that if anything, so the problem that Mitt Romney, and I'm not going to belabor this too much because we've got to get into the Thomas S. Monson news, but the problem that Mitt Romney had when he was running in 2012 was he had so many Republican handlers on him telling him to do the right things. It felt like he had so many limiters placed on him. And that's why, whether you're Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal, the Mitt Romney documentary on Netflix is really good because I think with that type of personality, I've actually had some very liberal and some very left-leaning people tell me if that was the Mitt Romney that was running, I probably would have considered it a little bit more than I actually did. And so
that's what I thought when I watched it. I said, why didn't that guy run?
And now you've got a situation where, like you said, he's matured a little bit. He's been in the public place, so he's used to this. And what's the RNC going to do right now? Because I bet you the RNC is probably like, oh, thank goodness. We've got someone like Mitt Romney who can go after Donald Trump, because it's no secret that the RNC and Donald Trump aren't very close right now. So, yeah, he's going to have free reign to just be like, psh, psh, I can do whatever I want.
This reminds me of a cartoon that I saw that was, I think it was actually during the presidential campaign in 2016, or was during the primaries at least. It was a picture of a little tiny Mitt Romney inside of one of those in case of emergency break here glass things, right? And he was like inside there, and then the RNC showed the elephant, with the RNC on it with a little hammer getting ready to break the glass, said, get Mitt Romney out. And, he might be finally coming to the Senate. Now, granted, he's not going to have all of the same leverage that Orrin Hatch had, because, that guy's been there since what? The Civil War.
Basically.
Right? So,
but at the same time, so he won't have the legacy that Orrin Hatch has, but he's got the name value out of almost anybody else in the Senate.
He'll get the press.
He'll get the press, and it wouldn't surprise me if you see him start wielding a lot of power among Republicans, mostly because he could be seen as maybe an elder statesman, even though he hasn't been in the Senate.
Right. Now, Mitt, this is what I'm going to tell you, because I know that you listen to the Mormon News Report, all right? Don't pull. Yeah, he's one of our listeners, probably one of our Patreon donors under a different name. Listen, Mitt, from me to you, don't pull a Jeff Flake on us, all right? Don't be all talk and no action. Don't be pulling this, I despise everything that Trump says, but heck, I'm going to vote for everything that the guy throws out there. Don't do that to us. You'll lose all of my respect.
You know what? I'll make sure that my buddy Mittens gets the memo, Brian. You got it. Okay, so let's get into the big story. The death of LDS Church President Thomas S. Monson. Thomas S. Monson passed away on January 2nd, 2018 at 10:01 p.m. Mountain Time. He died at age 90 from causes incident to age. He became the 16th president of the LDS Church on February 3rd, 2008, following the death of Gordon B. Hinckley. So he made it almost 10 years. He served as a counselor in the first presidency for over 22 years under 3 church presidents. And Brian, if I'm doing my history correctly, that would be Hinckley, Hunter, and Benson, I believe. He was ordained to the Quorum of the 12 on October 4th, 1963 at age 36 years old. So he served in the Quorum of the 12 for 54 years. His wife, Frances Monson, passed away on May 17th, 2013. So, Brian, there's so much stuff that we can get into. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw a couple of things out there, and you tell me what you want to grab onto so we can dig into it. So we can talk about the legacy of Thomas S. Monson. Okay, there's one thing. The New York Times wrote an obituary, which was just whoa. And we'll probably get into that.
We're going to have to get into that one.
We could talk about Monson the man versus Monson the leader versus Monson the president. We could talk about Monson's views on Mormonism, or we'll call it a player's choice, and you could choose whatever you want to talk about. So what should we get into?
Well, we're going to have to talk about the New York Times obituary, because that's what everybody's talking about this week. I think we should talk about his legacy here. And heck, Brant, I think if we've got more to discuss and we start running out of time, let's give this maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes worth of conversation max. And if we run out of time, let's roll this right over into our Patreon exclusive extended sessions.
I think that's a great idea. All right, so let's get into the obit, because the obit is probably going to be what most people are going to be hearing about and most people are going to be talking about. So
now, just real quick to clarify, this is the official obituary that was put out by the Mormon Newsroom, not the press takes on their versions of obituaries.
No, this is so a lot of the information that I was reading came from the Mormon Newsroom obit, all the stats and facts. So this one is specifically from the New York Times, and this was written a day after President Monson passed away. This is by Robert D. McFadden, and that's important, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Thomas S., and this is the lead, by the way. The lead is like the opening paragraph to try and get people interested.
And the headline, too. Do the headline.
The headline, well, so this is the headline as of today. Thomas S. Monson, president of the Mormon Church, dies at age 90. So
they shrunk it. Now we all know that it isn't necessarily the author of the piece that is in charge of doing the titles, right? It's usually the editor or whatever that does that. So, but that's interesting. A lot of that.
So remind me, I think the original one was the original headline talked something about the LDS Church and LGBTQ issues or something like that.
Yeah, well, and who denied women's ordination and didn't, they basically threw in everything in the in the headline. So anyway,
so these are the first 3 paragraphs, and they're very short. Thomas S. Monson, who as president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints since 2008, enlarged the ranks of female missionaries, but rebuffed demands to ordain women as priests and refused to alter church opposition to same-sex marriage, died on Tuesday in his home in Salt Lake City. He was 90. His death was announced on the church website. Facing vociferous demands to recognize same-sex marriage and weathering demonstrations at church headquarters by Mormon women pleading for the right to be ordained as priests, Mr. Monson did not bend. Teachings hold homosexuality to be immoral, bans on sexual intercourse outside male-female marriages, and an all-male priesthood would remain unaltered. So, Brian, this
I have so many thoughts about this. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's get into it a little bit. First of all, I will say this: for that to be your lead to bring up a lot of those things, It depends on your stripe of Mormonism, but I'm sitting here looking at it. And granted, it's not a secret that I'm an active believer, but I'm also sitting here looking at it, trying to look at it objectively, saying, wait a minute. One of the things that we talked about was Thomas S. Monson has been, at least from a Quorum of the 12 perspective, has been in there since 1963, 54 years. And those are the things that you're talking about, the things that happened within the last 10 years. Now, granted, they were all part of his time as LDS Church president, but you're telling me that he was not involved in anything else that might be, I don't know, newsworthy to bring up or put into that lead, just to show a little bit of respect to the man instead of trying to get in there. You're
only as good as your last song, Brant.
Well, that's definitely true within the Mormon internet, Brian. We all know that.
Well, I mean, so here's kind of my take on what's going on here. Yeah, the fact that they put that out there in front, okay, I get it. I mean, this is an outsider's perspective on the Mormon faith, so we kind of have to expect that, right? This is, let's face it, the outside world don't necessarily see us entirely positively, right? So, I mean, this is the New York Times. This is a fairly liberal newspaper, and this writer's going to look at this and say, I mean, what do Mormons represent, and what did Thomas S. Monson represent? And that's what he's going to think of. He's going to think of misogyny. He's going to think of homophobia. So I don't necessarily blame him for going there. Could he have saved it for maybe the second paragraph instead of the first paragraph, make it seem a little bit harsh? Sure. My biggest beef is that he repeated this theme throughout the rest of the article. It was like, throwing a little something nice. It's like, oh yeah, and he, earlier in his church administration, he oversaw a very large congregation with a lot of widows in it. Oh, and by the way, he was a homophobic misogynist. Oh, and then he did this and he did this. He expanded missionary work, and there's far more females that are serving in the missionary field. Oh, by the way, did we tell you he was a misogynist and a homophobe? Right? It's like they just kept hammering this over and over and over again. And I get it, guys. I get it. There's a lot of people out there saying, well, look what your church has done. Right? Like, look at what your church keeps throwing out there against same-sex marriage, the oppositions that they do, whether it be Cakegate or whether it be Prop 8 or whether it be November 15th policy. So, you guys keep going after and after and after LGBT. What do you expect us to do? Right? I get it. I totally get the anger. I get the rancor. But this is not an obituary. This is a commentary piece.
So, and I think this leads into the discussion that we could probably have about the legacy of Thomas S. Monson, because you're not wrong. And I think that for a non-Mormon to be writing that in a non-Mormon publication that's going to be sent out to millions of non-Mormons throughout the world, there are some of those things that should be brought up and it should be talked about, mostly because it does play into the legacy of Thomas S. Monson. These things happened during his time as LDS Church president. The church's involvement in Proposition 8, the church's involvement in Oberfell, the church's involvement in all these different things. It should be brought up. But to bring it up in the lead, and like you said, to keep banging over the head, it felt like it was someone who was trying to latch on. And I guess I said I'm going to start putting everyone on blast. I'll put the New York Times on blast, and I'll put Robert McFadden on blast because I'm sure he probably listens. But the thing that stood out to me was this was someone who seemed to not really care about the LDS position on a lot of things, seemed to not really care about why would this be happening, what's going on there, what are some of the complexities that might be happening with this whole thing. And frankly, it seemed like he was writing it either to fulfill whatever personal agenda that he had, or maybe to get clicks. Because at the end of the day, Brian, this was passed around everywhere. Ex-Mormons were holding this up saying, finally, someone is giving Thomas S. Monson and the church their just due by calling out all the horrific things that they did. Whereas the faithful Mormon internet, and I would actually say the righteous avengers and the hyper-Orthodox, were holding this up saying, see, this is another reason why the New York Times is awful. We can't read it. We can't trust it because look at how they threw us under the bus. And
it just feeds into our persecution complex at the same time, right? It's them against us. And so what does that do? That makes us kind of rebuff, retrench, and group back together, right?
So I got to ask you this question. So this is one of the things that was getting passed around by many faithful Mormons. They were comparing the obits for Thomas S. Monson compared to what the New York Times wrote for Hugo Chavez, for Fidel Castro, for Charles Manson. And it seemed like the tone that they were using for those three characters who have some pretty horrific past behind them was very different than Thomas S. Monson. They were making these individuals, the best way that I can describe it would be someone akin to a Steve Jobs, these revolutionaries or these charismatic figures. And then, there's Thomas S. Monson. And look at this. He was awful to gay people.
Well, listen, If it was the same writer for all of those, then I would probably throw a bigger fit over it and saying, look, you threw this tone out on this guy, and then you throw our prophet under the bus. But if it's different writers, then it's it kind of comes back down to this guy, McFadden, having a personal issue with Mormonism, with Thomas S. Monson, and putting it on full display. Again, not completely unwarranted, mind you, right? But still writing it in such a manner to where it really just ended up being kind of a hit piece instead of an obituary. Now, and I also think that there's a valid comparison to make. I mean, communism wasn't that friendly to LGBT either, folks. Let's face it, right? And not to defend my church too much, but for crying out loud, we haven't killed LGBT people as far as I'm aware.
Well, but that's in the eye of the beholder.
No, you're right. You're right. I need to take that back because I'm going to get a lot of heat from that.
Yeah.
The suicide rate in Utah, and I was thinking, putting them on firing death squads, right? So I take that back. The suicide rate in Utah, particularly among teen youth, is astronomical. It's an epidemic level. And yes, the LDS Church rhetoric on LGBT issues is definitely at play in this. So listeners, don't go after me on that one. I understand. I was just talking about being in front of a firing squad or being thrown into prison.
Right. And so here's an example of an obit done right. And I don't think it should be a surprise to many people. I enjoy the Salt Lake Tribune. I enjoy Peggy Fletcher Stack. Peggy knows what she's doing, and Peggy writes very well, specifically about Mormon things. So here's what she wrote. This is from her third paragraph in her obituary of Thomas S. Monson. During Monson's nearly 10-year presidential tenure, which ended with his death Tuesday night at age 90 of causes incident to age, Mormonism faced some of the most intense public scrutiny in its history. From a divisive vote over gay marriage to high-profile Mormon candidacies for president and a hotly debated policy for same-sex couples and their children. Still, the private prophet stayed largely behind the scenes, showing up unexpectedly at funerals, comforting the bereaved, visiting the sick, and before her death, caring for his wife, Frances. That's how you do an obit.
Right. And Peggy Fletcher Stack is a class act, and I expect nothing less from her. However, there's one thing that people seem to be missing over and over again in this. He's our last living general authority that was there at the 1976 revelation, giving priesthood ordination to all worthy members.
78.
All worthy males.
Yeah.
78. Thank you. Thank you. 76. Well, there was another one, a quieter one in 76.
Oh,
right. This one was to the all worthy members one that I just messed up on.
Well, and so okay, so you bring that up, and that's another interesting thing to consider. This is some research that somebody else did, and I didn't grab names. I'm sorry about that. The gap in date of ordination between President Monson, 1963, and President Russell M. Nelson, 1984, is indicative that this change in leadership is also a major generational one. While the two are not so far apart in birth dates, the church culture at the time they rose to rank of apostle is clearly different. Monson is the last of the generation of young apostles without extensive career. I'd actually said academic ties as well. However, Monson did some graduate work at the University of Utah and taught shortly thereafter. After he was an apostle, the church actually allowed him to get an MBA at BYU. But the change goes deeper than that. As noted in the Deseret News, Monson was an apostolic colleague with those who grew up with church-sanctioned polygamy, notably Joseph F. Smith Jr. He was the last of those present when the 1978 revelation on the priesthood came. He was, in fact, the last of those with insider knowledge of anything that happened in the quorum between 1963 and 1984. And for context, one of those things that was happening between 1963 and 1984, because I know you're interested in this, Brian, and I am as well, the formation of the church history department and everything going on with Leonard Arrington. He was there during
the rise and fall of it.
Yep. He was the last remaining apostle, conspicuous in his lifelong support of scouting. The Hinckley-Monson duo in the first presidency has been a fixture pretty much my entire life. This person said since 1985. I would say my entire life, since 1984, and now they're both gone. So those are some interesting things to consider as well. And I think that we are going to see President Thomas S. Monson, to me, was the last of the old guard. And I think that we're going to see an interesting, could be good, could be bad, I don't know. But we're going to see an interesting change in how the LDS Church leadership proceeds because of that big age gap. I mean, that's 63 to 84. That's 19 years. Is my math right? Ish, kind of. So, yeah. So, okay, so there's that. A couple other things I want to bring up, and I know we're reading a lot, but that's because there's some interesting things out there. Let me give you an example of some New York Times reporting done right. This is by Lori Goodstein, and she wrote a piece called, "For Mormons, Succession Drama is Against Their Religion." Brian, I got in fights with people about this article. So I'm going to read you a paragraph, and I'm going to tell you the fights I got in with people, and I want you to tell me, look, we already know that you're going to agree with me, but just hear me out. Okay. The gerontocracy.
I disagree.
Actually, that is one of the things I disagreed with. The gerontocracy at the top of the church has the advantage of experience, but there are also some obvious disadvantages. Some Mormon bloggers have commented in recent years that President Monson appeared to be disoriented or gave rambling speeches in public appearances. The church announced in October that he was no longer coming into the office, and he did not appear that month at the church's semi-annual international gathering, its general conference. I think that's a fairly accurate way to report some of the stuff, and that was just one paragraph in the entire piece. The entire piece is very good. I recommend it to everyone. Lori does a very, very good job reporting on Mormon issues. She tries to grab a lot of different sources, and her sources, just from seeing some of the quotes that get published, very good, very high quality. Someone got in a fight with me about the word gerontocracy.
Okay.
Because they were sitting there saying, that's derogatory. That's like them saying it's a bunch of old men. And
well, it is.
That's what it means.
Like, I mean, I'm sorry, but it is.
Look at the dictionary. That's what it means.
You look at who's in the quorum that's under 40, under 50, under 60, for crying out loud. I mean,
how are you supposed to? I mean, sure, you could describe them as an elderly group, but I think the thing I wrote to this person was like, that's a fairly academic or like true to the actual definition.
Right. In fact, Monson was the last one who was called to the quorum who was under the age of 50.
Yep. So how do you want to describe that? That's a good question.
Well, I think people need to relax on stuff like that.
They do. Okay, so let's talk about this. President Monson the man versus President Monson the leader versus President Monson the president.
Okay.
So let me throw something out there. The latest edition of the Mormon Land podcast, which is done by the Salt Lake Tribune, Jennifer Napier Pierce, David Noyce, and Peggy Fletcher Stack, really, really good, and I highly recommend it to everybody. They interviewed Matthew Bowman, and Matt did a good job of really trying to get into this topic itself. Monson the man versus Monson the leader versus Monson the president. Brian, bold stance, hot take.
Here we go.
I think that Gordon B. Hinckley was a much stronger and influential fixture as president of the LDS Church than Thomas S. Monson was.
As president. Because remember, Gordon B. Hinckley essentially had the reins since David O. McKay. When David O. McKay started falling into ill health, Gordon B. Hinckley was really the one who kind of rose up and led the direction of the church. So way before his presidential years, he had a strong influence. Yep.
And I think that really Hinckley really embraced media. Hinckley was going on places like I want to say
Larry King Live.
Larry King. He was going on Larry King. He was going on a few other places. Gosh, who's the guy that wrote the introduction to his book? I'm blanking on his name. 60 Minutes. He was on 60 Minutes, interviewed by, gosh, I know someone's yelling at their podcast or their phone right now. Anyways,
that'll be our question for the week. Who was the guy that was on 60 Minutes?
So he was very good with that, but he was also a very strong public presence, whereas Monson, really from 2008, he really wasn't. He was more behind the scenes. Now, some could say that kind of fits with Monson's personality. Monson was the type of guy who did a lot of things behind the scenes, maybe not in front and not in public with everybody. But that is something to be considered in the fact of, and we're going to get into this podcast a little bit later. There was a podcast from Radio West with Doug Fabrizio and a group of panelists. And one of those panelists was Greg Prince. And Greg Prince said that under Hinckley and others, I think he included Hinckley, Kimball, and McKay, the LDS Church presidency was more of a monarchy. It was more an individual person. Whereas recently with Lee, Benson, later years of Kimball, Hunter, and Thomas S. Monson, it turned into more of a democracy with the entire first presidency. And I think the point that he was making was you had these individuals who were very involved in certain things, and you could see their vision, and they were working towards that vision. Whereas it seemed like, in his opinion, Monson was one who was just kind of let's proceed on the course.
So that's not necessarily a negative comment, right? I mean, I think most of us would say that democratic leadership is usually better than kind of a monarchy or a theocracy or whatever it is. At the same time, I think it's clear to me. Maybe it's more apparent with Monson, but the church has pretty much always been governed. Well, since Brigham Young, we've always been governed by the Quorum of 12. The Quorum of 12 has always had a lot of say in church affairs, more so than I think people realize. I think that the first presidency, while they definitely have their role and they definitely have the ability to supersede things if they feel really strong, particularly the president of the church. If he feels a really strong impression about something or a strong revelation comes to him, then the quorum is going to listen for sure. But by and large, I think that they've always been kind of a group that tries to hash things out as a group.
Yeah, well, and I would say, it's tough because within the modern era, we don't have that much. I don't know how to phrase it, like insider accounts, but that's not the best way to describe it. We don't have much insight into the modern
core workings of the
Yeah, I mean, we have some with McKay, we have some with Kimball. We'll see what happens in the future. But I think that's the big question: is has the quorum shifted and become maybe the most? Oh gosh, people are not going to like this. The most powerful body within the LDS Church as far as their own plans, agendas, and where they want to go with things, versus maybe the LDS Church president being the one that's setting the course. I don't know, but it might be something along those lines. It might also depend on the personality of the president, which might explain someone like McKay or Hinckley versus Monson.
Right.
So a couple other things I want to get into, and then we've got some other things to talk about as far as this. There were some really good pieces written, and I just want to hit on a few of them. This is from Gordon Monson at the Salt Lake Tribune. So Gordon Monson is someone who does a lot of writing on sports, specifically, I think he writes a lot on the Utes and everything like that. Title: Thomas S. Monson was more than a Mormon prophet. He was, like you and me, a sports fan. So he was talking about a time that he was going to watch his daughter, I think it was play volleyball or tennis. About 10 minutes passed before I saw President Monson standing right in front of me, blocking my view just as my daughter was hitting an ace. He may have been tight with the man upstairs, but he still made a better door than window. He looked at me sternly, extended out his big paw, and said as we shook hands, "I guess one Monson ought to be courteous enough to come introduce himself to the other." He grinned and then guffawed as he said it. I stood and talked a bit with him off to the side for a while, and then we walked a bit. Yeah, he loves sports. This was years ago, but the warmth spilling out from Thomas S. Monson that day has stayed with me. It was sincere and it was memorable. Having interviewed thousands of people of prominence over the last 40 years, for me, the essence of the guy was absolutely unique, which is a nice sentiment. Robert Kirby. Brian, you know what? Here's the goal for 2018. We got to get Robert Kirby on this podcast.
That's definitely on my bucket list, you know, and I lovingly refer to Robert Kirby as our patron saint of satire. Robert Kirby is my spirit animal.
Look, it's really no secret that Mormons aren't that good at humor. I would hold up Robert Kirby as like, this guy is really good. He's better than most.
He's kind of our Mark Twain, don't you think?
Yes, that's a great way of describing it. So here's what he wrote: the 8 Mormon prophets I have known, from McKay to the newly departed Monson. So he was talking a little bit about the passing of Monson. He said, if I sound lighthearted during the somber time, it's because I am. I fail to see the downside in him being dead, provided, of course, that things work the way we discuss them in the church. But if God is just, you can bet that Monson isn't upset about being dead. He's caught up with his wife and lots of other loved ones who went before him. He also knows the rest of his family is only half a second behind him in terms of eternity. And it's not like he died and left us in the lurch. We have his successor already warmed up. That's the way it works for us. So he talks about some of the LDS prophets that have been around during his lifetime. And he said, then came Gordon B. Hinckley, the only Mormon prophet who managed to terrify me. It was at Brigham Young University, and a couple of years after I started whacking LDS culture around in the newspaper. I already had managed to upset a lot of the self-important. He walked past with his entourage, spotted me in the crowd, smiled, and said, "Hi, Robert." I was so dead. It's one thing to lampoon an easily offended culture, and another thing to be immediately recognized to its leader. I waited for months, but nothing happened. Years later, I received a letter from his personal secretary telling me that Hinckley wanted me to keep having fun.
Wow. You know, that's awesome, though.
I would cherish that. I'd be like, yeah, this is my free pass right here.
Right.
By Hinckley
when he gets up into the pearly gates, I think he can just show that and get admitted.
So let's get into one last look back, and then we'll get into a certain podcast that was released this week. How's that?
Sure.
So this is from The Atlantic. McKay Coppins, he is a fellow Mormon and political reporter extraordinaire. He actually cut his chops when he was working for BuzzFeed News, traveling around with the Mitt Romney campaign, wrote a lot of really good pieces in 2012. Actually, is writing for The Atlantic, and I think he's doing some work at the University of Chicago Institute of Politics.
And just real quick, I liked this piece, right? I read a ton of articles just like you did this week. This Atlantic piece I thought was really the way to go.
And really, like, I aside from going to Utah-based publications, because they're going to know a little bit more and have some of the nuance, it's The Atlantic, and McKay is a great writer. So here's what he wrote. As a lifelong Mormon, I know as well as anyone how often members of Monson's church fail to live up to this standard. Monson, no doubt, fell short too. But Mormonism is at its best when it's reaching for that ideal, whether it's building one of America's largest private welfare systems, or organizing refugee relief efforts, or just inspiring a busy young dad with a demanding job to set aside a couple of hours every week to help people who have less than he has. In a country plagued by atomization, where ever more isolated people are growing ever more suspicious of their fellow citizens, Monson was, in its own way, a radically countercultural message.
Yeah, I just want to stand up and applaud that. I think that's one of the most lovely, well-written obituary paragraphs in any of the articles that we've read.
So we've got a couple more articles. We'll throw them in the show notes. We're not going to get into it too much because we're probably running short on time, aren't we, Brian?
Oh, yeah, we're over time.
Of course. Let's get into this one. Radio West. Now, Brian, I have consistently said Radio West and its host, Doug Fabrizio, are the best when they're covering Mormon topics. Doug is, in my opinion, the best interviewer when it comes to Mormonism. He pulls things out of people. He knows the right amount to push and pull. I think he kind of does what we do. I don't think he strives to do this, but he irks the disaffected side off just a little bit. He irks the believer side off just a little bit to try and get a good story and get the information out of their interviewers. So they posted a podcast this week, The Life and Legacy of Thomas S. Monson. Let's play a little game, shall we, Brian? This game's called One of These Things is Not Like the Other. So let's go over their guest list, shall we? Guests: Patrick Mason, head of the Mormon Studies program at Claremont University. Greg Prince, accomplished author, wrote the great Arrington biography, wrote the great David O. McKay biography, award-winning author. Andrea Radke Moss, highly accomplished historian in women's studies at BYU Idaho, my alma mater, but also has done things at MHA. I believe she's published in Dialogue. Okay. And John Dehlin? Really?
John Dehlin.
Bring on. You know what? Listen,
it almost sounds like he was brought in as the Confederate in this, right?
Maybe it was the comic relief. I don't know. But, okay. You and I were talking about this because I think I was hate listening to this podcast while I was talking to you. And the thing that stood out to me was, I guess, I'm not angry, okay? As much as it disappointed me, I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. I am your father when he finds out that, hypothetically, you got a ticket. Or maybe even worse, that you went to a party and you got drunk, or that you've been sneaking cigarettes in your room or something like that. They're not going to come in there ready to go, yelling and screaming their head off. No, what they're going to do is they're going to come in, they're going to look at you, and I'm looking at the camera right now, and say, I'm disappointed in you. And that's how I felt with this interview. I was disappointed. And I was mostly disappointed because I hold Doug to a much higher standard. And frankly, what I felt was happening was once John came on, it was him and John having this bro fest. It felt like Doug was pulling at every single piece of speculative online rumors and innuendos about Thomas S. Monson days after he had passed away, because he was trying to get a juicy and salacious story. And Patrick and Greg and Andrea really weren't having it. And then John came on, and John's just going to shoot from the hip and, hey, man, I got my inside sources, and I know exactly what happened because I know people. It doesn't matter if they may or may not be telling me the truth.
Started reading off the Reddit threads, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, because that's where we go for all of the source of knowledge is Reddit and Facebook, because there's nothing on there that is going to be, people don't do that, right? Just go on the internet and lie. You got to be kidding me. And basically what happened was once John came on, then you saw both Patrick and Greg. Andrea had to drop off, but Patrick and Greg start getting a little more vocal about certain things. I don't know why. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it is something to listen to. And Brian, I was just sitting here going, what the heck is going on? Like, what world are we living in where, like, God, I expected more, because I was sitting there going, great, this is going to be the podcast that I want to listen to and that I want to do. How do we put Thomas S. Monson's life into context? And they didn't do it. And I was really disappointed in that.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like they had a real opportunity here, and they had a stellar all-star cast. But I don't know what it is. It seems like Fabrizio really likes Dehlin, and seems to talk to him and invite him on quite often to talk about whatever topic. I think in this case, it was probably a miss.
Well, and that's it is what it is. That's all I can say. So I don't know. Should we talk about the thing in that interview that really ticked me off, or should I be nice? Let's
go ahead and talk about the thing in the interview that really ticked you off, and then from there, let's duck, cover, run away, and maybe get Geraldine on.
Okay. So John and Doug were talking, and one of the things that John had brought up to Doug was about President Nelson. I guess we could call him President-elect Nelson.
President-elect. I don't know that we can use president-elect in a church that really doesn't hold elections, Brant.
And I think, and I want to bring this up, not because I want to keep bagging on this whole thing, but I want to provide context. And I want people to listen, because I actually transcribed this whole thing because I want to make sure I heard it correctly. All right, so no more contextualizing, no more editorializing. I'll just read you what the transcript says. Fabrizio, John, what do you think about the opportunity now for new President Nelson to appoint 2 new apostles? A lot of people thought when there were 3 apostles with 3 openings not so long ago that you would get some diversity. It absolutely did not happen. None of the 3 that were chosen really lived that far off the Wasatch Front, if ever at all. I thought it was kind of interesting. A lot of observers have taken note of that, but now there's an opportunity. I wonder if this is going to be a sign or a signal. Delin, I've almost felt like the barrier to having non-U.S. people become apostles is that the church is such a massive conglomerate of assets and financial investments that as soon as you appoint someone not from the U.S. into the apostleship, you are basically putting them in line to become the president of the corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and owning all the massive corporate and financial interests that the church has. So I don't know how they would ever want to give that up to someone who wasn't from the U.S. There just aren't a lot of African-American Mormons who are at that level in the U.S. or people of color, Hispanics, Latin Americans, etc. Wait a minute. That's the reason why we're not going to have a non-American as a member of the Quorum of the 12. Because you think there's some vast conspiracy regarding that stuff? Are you kidding me? And the thing that really ticked me off was Doug just kind of went, uh-huh. And I'm sitting here going, Doug, you're better than this. Just push him a little bit and say, where are you coming up with this stuff?
Well, and I wonder if Doug was just flabbergasted. Like, what okay, what? We're running out of time. I'm just going to move on over this. But man, there's so many things wrong with what he's saying. First of all, the president of the church is not the sole owner of all the corporate interests of the church, right? I mean, there is the corporate office of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but there's also the corporate office of the presiding bishopric of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The land holdings, the business holdings, all that stuff ultimately goes through the presiding bishopric of the church, not the president of the church. So if you're gunning for corporate control over the church, you're going to the wrong position, buddy.
I mean, you really think you're going to get rich with the Mormons? Are you kidding me?
Right. And then number 2, I mean, can you kind of see what he said as being a little bit offensive?
Yeah. Well, okay. So if I were to give him the benefit of the doubt, I think what he was trying to say was that African Americans or Hispanics or Latinos or Latin Americans, they might not be at that level as far as the church goes. At the same time, I'm sitting here going, whoa, if this is just a rumor that you heard, that's pretty offensive to like just run out there and trot it out with it. Do you have any?
I'm sure he heard it on Reddit. So
yeah, well, of course, the bastion of all knowledge. So Brian, let's do this. I think there's still a couple more things I want to get into with President Monson. We're probably going a little bit over on time. I know we got Geraldine waiting in our wonderful green room with all of our green M&Ms and everything like that. Listen, if I could tell you people the writer that she gave us to make sure that she could come on, you guys would be shocked. So let's do this. I want to get into looking at all the things that happened during President Monson's time in office. So let's do this. We'll do that for our extended session. So all you Patreons, if you want to hear a little bit more about this stuff, there's that. Can I toss a question of the week out?
Let's do a question of the week.
Okay. So we've been talking a lot about the legacy of Thomas S. Monson. So I want to know a couple of things. A, what is the legacy of Thomas S. Monson going to be in history books when we look back at this time? And B, what do you think the presidency of Russell M. Nelson is going to look like?
And let's just remind our listeners, we prefer not to use swears on our show, so please try to keep it family friendly.
Keep it classy. You can hit us up. You can hit us up at mail@mormonnewsreport.com. You can find us on Twitter at The Mormon News. You can hit us up on Facebook. We actually get a lot of responses to our Facebook page. Brian, I've got a little Christmas gift for you. You ready for this?
Let's do it.
You could leave us a voicemail, 801-987-0192. Call that number. It'll get you right into our voicemail system. If it's good, they will play it on the air. 801-987-0192. I tried to find a cool, Mormon anagram that we could use with all those. There's nothing. 801-987-0192. And we'll be back in just a minute.
Well, let's go ahead and run with your commercial.
I know. It's the new year. You're looking at that heating bill and that credit card bill from Christmas thinking, man, that Hatchimal for $40 was kind of a joke. My kid barely plays with it. And what is this thing? Oh, wait, is that just me? Oh, okay. Well, listen, I learned my lesson this year. All right. So I know asking for a Patreon donation right now is probably not the best idea. Except, see, it is the best idea. After the novelty of your Snuggie or your keyboard necktie or that really slick new vacuum wears off, you got to wait another 12 months for Christmas. For just $1 or more per month, we here at the Mormon News Report can be the gift that keeps on giving. You won't forget us when you get the extended session podcast hot and fresh in your podcast queue every week, especially when we drop our choice nuggets that make you the envy of all your church friends on Sunday. $1 per month or more gets you hearty chuckles, stunning insight, or maybe even an audible, oh my gosh. Ready to make the jump? Just visit patreon.com/Mormon News Report. That's patreon.com/Mormon News Report and become a subscriber today. Hello, everybody. Let's get right into it. Without any further ado, we are getting ready to interview Geraldine Hassel-Poole. Geraldine was born and raised in Southern Oregon, the eldest of 8 children. She's the mother of 5, ages 7 to 23. She's been married for nearly 25 years to, the character known as Jeffrey Poole. She is active in feminist and LGBTQ communities as a Mormon advocate for inclusion and acceptance. She works from home as a freelance web and print designer. She's also the mastermind behind Dang You to Heck, a Mormon version of a game that resides somewhere between Apples to Apples and Cards Against Humanity. Geraldine, welcome to the show. I'm surprised it's taken us this long to get you on, but thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. First of all, my children are now older than that.
Okay, so obviously
you need to update your LinkedIn there, Geraldine.
Oh, that's from LinkedIn. Yeah, they're 9 to, my oldest is now 26 as of today.
Oh, today. Well, happy birthday to your 26-year-old.
Yeah, this is the most happy birthday he's going to get out of me all day. So happy birthday.
Well.
Okay, so at least this will be cemented into a YouTube video that you can show him over and over.
Like, just
Mother of the year.
Think of the legacy that we're now leaving. He can see the video. We can listen to the podcast. It's like, hey, I'm going to figure out how to put this in your book of remembrance that we immortalize you here.
Oh, Glenn, your mom brushed your hair on your birthday.
Yeah, and went on some dopey podcast. Hey, listen, Geraldine, I understand that you've been down with the flu, and I really appreciate you stepping up to chat with us. Yeah, you've got seriously. Hold on, no, bring that back. Bring it back. Is that a bottle of NyQuil with a straw in it, like as if you're like sipping like at a bar? Oh, that's phenomenal. See, that's Mormon drunk right there. That's great.
That is how
I mean, because basically NyQuil is schnapps. We all know that.
It tastes terrible.
It tastes terrible. You're sitting there just sipping on it.
So here's the thing. Geraldine and I, and Brian and Geraldine and I, we've known each other for a very long time. Geraldine, you're going to appreciate this. You know my wife.
Yeah.
My wife found out that you were coming on tonight, and she goes, "Are you really going to interview Geraldine?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh, I think I'll listen to your podcast." She doesn't listen when I'm on it, and I've been doing this for how many weeks? But you come on, and all of a sudden, you're going to swoop in like this, redeeming angel that'll finally get her to listen. So,
okay, Brant, I have to tell you this quick story. So, Geraldine, you know my wife.
Yeah.
Denise, yeah. So, when I told my wife I was going to be interviewing Geraldine Hassel-Poole tonight, you know what she said? She said, "I might actually listen to that episode."
Yeah.
I kid you not.
So our spouses. So the big question, Geraldine, is going to be this: does Jeffrey know that you're coming on with us, and is he going to listen? Because you're talking to Brant and Brian. Of course, I'm going to listen to them.
You talking to who?
He's just hoping I'll talk about him.
Okay, so let's get into it. I got to ask.
He'll probably bomb somewhere. From the back here.
As long as he's clothed, then I won't have to put the little black box around his junk as he's walking by.
He should be clothed.
No promises.
Well, yeah. Well, it depends. It depends. If he's wearing his yoga pants, you might have to blur out a couple of things. But, okay, so let's. I got to ask you about this. Dang You to Heck. What is this thing? Tell me a little bit about it.
So I always thought I was a big Cards Against Humanity fan for a long time. And there was a period of time where I really wanted to make a Mormon version of that because I thought it'd be really funny. And and then I just did it. I think I talked to a bunch of people for a while, like, we should do this together. And finally I just did it. And I called it another name.
We'll get into that.
And I started it in November of 2014, and then as of January 1st, it is now of 2018. It is known by the name Dang You to Heck.
So, did you bring a copy of the game to show us? Here we are.
Here, I wrap it in brown paper so that your bishop doesn't know what's inside.
So that he thinks it's liqueur or NyQuil or something?
Yeah. I'll include a straw.
All right, so we're fully in agreement. This is probably going to be like a PG-13 show, right? Didn't porno magazines used to come in brown paper wrapping?
I don't know.
I didn't. Yeah, I mean, that's way before my time, Brant.
Well, okay, it's obviously before my time, too.
Back when I used to subscribe to them, Brant.
What I always heard about is
they came in metal casks.
Brown wrapping. Okay, so let me just so we can level set for everyone. Cards Against Humanity is a game where you're given situations. Like a question would be, some people say that Barack Obama is blank, and then you have a bunch of response cards. The thing is, the response cards are some of the most. How would you describe the response cards?
So
heretical.
It's like a question and answer thing, and so like it can be played very innocently, but it can also be played very not innocently,
aggressively.
like basically the point of the game, at least. Okay, so you've got Cards Against Humanity, which is the aggressive version of the game, and then you've got like Apples to Apples, which is the nicer version of the game. The thing with Cards Against Humanity is the whole purpose of, at least the times that I played, the whole purpose is how much can you offend people and how much can you see who can get like really uppity about it.
Well, and like a good guttural laugh, right? You're trying to get a good guttural laugh out of the person whose turn it is.
Like you kind of throw away your own personal,
like NyQuil through the nostrils, kind of like.
Like you throw away your own personal morals and ethics and just try and see the funniness of the whole thing. Okay, so then
there's Bonnie Poole right there.
Hey, Bonnie.
Hi, Bonnie.
So the question is going to be this: so is the point to make Mormons laugh? Is the point to needle the Mormons a little bit? Like where were you thinking?
I think it's to break our testimonies, isn't it?
No, I'm not one of those guys. Hold on, I'm unwrapping. I'm doing an unboxing.
Oh, we're doing an unboxing.
We're making you unwrap this one? I mean, that could be, that's a sale item right there.
Yes, well, I can definitely rewrap, so.
Enough grocery stores still carry brown paper bags, apparently.
My point in making it was that people could poke fun at Mormon culture without, and I tried not to make it, like I didn't want to have like temple jokes, really.
Right.
Like I feel like there's a point between being respectful and being offensive. Yeah. And I feel like there's the super fine line that you have to walk.
We walk that line every week.
So that I wanted the game to appeal to Orthodox Mormons and ex-Mormons, and maybe both wishing I had pushed it farther or hadn't pushed it so far, maybe. But I mean, I didn't want to make an ex-Mormon game. I didn't want to make a pro-Mormon game. I just wanted to make a Mormon fun game.
Yeah, something where we can where we can not take ourselves so seriously.
Exactly.
So okay, and we're gonna so let me put it this way. We're gonna get into the fact that, and I will go ahead, and this is a spoiler alert. I'm sick of all the Mormons. Okay, and so we're gonna I need you to like talk me through this whole thing. But we gotta address the elephant in the room. I didn't know this game as Dang You to Heck.
Nobody did.
Am I allowed to say what it used to be known as?
I think so. I mean, okay, I don't.
Well, the problem is I just asked for permission, and that wasn't. So I knew the game as Mormanity.
Yes.
I like that name for the game. I think that was a great game, but it's not Mormanity anymore.
No.
Does it have to do with a certain website that is known as Mormanity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what went on with having to change it? Like what? I mean, not that I want to get you in any legal trouble, but
oh no, I don't think you will.
So give me the scoop.
On December 10th, I believe, I got an email from
the Grinch.
From Jeff Lindsay, who owns the trademark to the name Mormanity. Now, I had created the game in November of 2014. He trademarked the name Mormanity in July of 2015. claiming that he had been blogging under that name since 2004. Which
But didn't hold a copyright until 2015.
Right. At first, so the first thing I did, he insisted that I immediately stop using. I have all of his emails. I could do a dramatic reading.
Let's do it.
It would be really dramatic.
No, I'm into it.
Okay. This is the first. So the first email. He sent the first email to my web host, which is GoDaddy, and said, as the owner of the Mormanity trademark, and he included the documentation, which has been in use since 2004, I am troubled by the infringement of my mark at mormanitygame.com and ask you to speedily arrange to relinquish this domain and immediately cease all use of the Mormanity name. Please call me at, insert phone number, if you wish to discuss, and let me know what steps you will take. That's what he sent to my web host.
Speedily erase. Well, now.
Yeah. And then he sent me an email saying, I hope you received my previous note. Let me say that I don't mean to be harsh and recognize that people can launch interesting projects without noticing or worrying about freedom to operate and possible infringement of others' rights. But I do need to protect the Mormanity mark that I have created and built over many years. Let's see. There's a lot of...
So that one, he said, per my previous email?
Yeah, the one that he meant. The one that he sent to my web host.
So this is going to be radio gold right here. I'm going to describe a meme, okay? My personal favorite meme, probably because I have to do what I lovingly refer to as hashtag business with Brant. My personal favorite meme is the more angrier I get, the more professional my emails sound. So then it goes into, per my previous email, please see the attached. And that's kind of what I'm getting a vibe of right now. Like, excuse me, per my previous email, don't you understand? I am furious right now.
Yeah. I saw your website today at Mormanity Game. It was clear you are in full operation and using my mark without my permission. It would have been better if I had known of this development earlier and knew how to contact you earlier to counsel you more directly. Counsel me.
Oh, counsel you more directly.
Spoken like a true bishop or former bishop or whatever he was.
He's actually in whatever the equivalent is of a stake presidency in the over branches in China.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
He counsels regularly.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. In any case, this is, unfortunately for both of us, a pretty clear infringement of my brand and the unique creative term Mormanity that I have developed since 2004. It has caused confusion among some LDS people already. And to prevent further confusion and harm to my intellectual property rights, I do have to ask you to cease immediately. Please call me to discuss.
Yeah, so
and it hold on, it goes on.
Excuse me.
But wait, pause before then, because I just want to throw this out as a completely side thing, but I don't want to detract onto this. Speaking of confusion, do you remember when what blog site was it that was it LDS Living's online thing that changed their name to the Mormon Hub?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I mean, talk about confusion, right? Anyway,
you know what? Hey, do you remember there was this musical out there? I think they talked about Mormons. Was it called like the Book of Mormon musical?
I was so confused. I went there expecting to learn about the Book of Mormon.
Where were the Mormons at? Where were they at?
Anyway, all right, back to this episode. Continue.
You know what, Brian? We really should have done some more like production and gotten like some dramatic music, like soap opera, because she's reading this.
Oh man, we need some soap music.
Where's my popcorn?
In addition to ceasing marketing anything with the Mormanity name, I'll ask you to relinquish the Mormanity Game trademark and at a minimum ensure that it immediately redirects to my site, mormanity.blogspot.com.
Sorry. That's rich.
Don't you know the power that a .blogspot.com web address has? Please.
He offered me $100 for the domain name. Again, if it is unreasonable in your opinion, let's talk. Sorry for the trouble, but this is a problem that needs immediate attention. and then included his phone number and said, I'm living in China, so please don't try to reach me at 3 a.m. China time.
Well, how about he not try and reach you at 3 a.m. Utah time?
So you responded to this.
I responded. I contacted an attorney wanting to know what exactly were my rights with the matter, and like how, because also then I got an email from my host that said, we don't want to be involved in any trademark dispute. We're going to shut down your website. But it's like right before Christmas, which is a hot time for my website because people think this is a great game to give to family for Christmas, and it is.
Right. I mean, it's if he's. I mean, sorry, but the jerk could have waited until after the New Year, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Listen, Brian, do not doubt the number of clicks that happen around Christmas time. All right.
He probably didn't even put up a blog post the entire month of December.
That's what we should have checked to see if he put up a blog post. But so, Geraldine, just so I'm clear, so this is your freelance site that you use for work, right? Like this.
Well, no, this is just the Mormanity for the game. That was the site where I was playing the game. That's what he was in contention.
But still, I mean, that game is kind of one of your staple products that you've created.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so.
And I just released 2 new expansion packs, and all of my shipping data was on the website. Like if that had gone down, I would have lost everything. So I contacted an attorney in order to find out what my rights were and to negotiate with him. And I responded with, Jeff, I was not aware of your blog at mormanity.blogspot.com. You're welcome for the free PR. Prior to the publication of Mormanity in November 2014, from my perspective, Mormanity is a word used to refer to all things Mormon, making a pun when I created Mormanity in the style of Cards Against Humanity. Such parody use is a fair use under trademark law, and I believe unlikely to cause confusion with any other use of Mormanity, which is the whole thing about trademark law, right? It's to not create confusion, brand confusion.
Right.
So then I went back. There was some discussion about how, because he had been blogging in Wisconsin in 2004, and because the game was created in Utah, it was different. Anyway, and then I said that I would add a clarification to my website saying that I'm not affiliated with mormanity.blogspot.com. And
so maybe a little redirect for him or something.
Yeah. Yep.
So when did the change happen from Mormanity over to Dang You to Heck?
That happened January 1st. So then we went back and forth about what trademark actually meant. And then I sent him a very
Did he mansplain trademark to you?
He did. He did. And I sent him a very salty email about that. I actually told him that he should make an appointment with a trademark and patent attorney who would help him to understand trademark laws, which he did. I don't think he liked. But anyway, I said that because I didn't feel like fighting, I will be done January 1st. I said I only print in small batches. I will change the URL and Facebook page on January 1st and will stop referring to my game as Mormanity. I will rename it and continue to sell it under a different name. And I will tell people that it was formerly known under that name and direct them to your blog. And then I said, you originally offered $100. GoDaddy lists the value of the URL at $541. I'm happy to meet you near the middle at $250.
And that's how the cookie crumbles.
Is that the end of the story, or is the?
Oh, no. So a few days later, I get a PayPal notification that he'd sent me $150. And then the very next day, all of my websites were gone. All of them.
And then which day was this?
This was the 19th of December.
So all of your websites were gone effectively December 20th.
Yep.
A week before Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, 5 days before Christmas.
And one of the important things, like
this is why I call. This is what Scrooge. Sorry, but.
And I'm not so concerned with like the financial impact from that. What I was mostly concerned with is Christmas is a time when I put on a thing called Safe Christmas,
yep,
where I provide Christmas for LGBTQ Mormons in Utah who don't have another place to spend Christmas. They don't have a affirming family, or they need a place to unwind after family dinners, or anyway.
They just need a safe space, right?
Yeah, they just need a safe space where their pronouns are respected, and they can just be themselves. So I do all my fundraising through my website. I do all my collection of info from people through the website, and all of it was gone too.
And is it permanently gone?
No. It was restored, but only after I cried a lot of tears to my web host.
Yeah.
And I have never cried so hard or so much that day. Anyway, I know, and I'm not a crier, so that's
so you brought up Safe Christmas. I got to ask, how many and you don't have to go into specifics, but how many LGBTQ individuals, whether they're youth or older, how many of them are you hosting and providing a safe environment for Christmas?
We plan on 30 to 40.
Wow.
That's about what we got.
And that's just, and that's predominantly in the southern, kind of South Salt Lake to Provo area.
Yeah, part of the problem with part of the work that goes into making Safe Christmas happen is that there is a lot of relationship building, because you have to, I sound like a missionary now, don't I? But I have to create these relationships of trust. But I have to let people know, like, I'm for real. I really want you to come hang out with me at Christmas. I'm not going to ditch you for my family. I'm ditching my family for you. I want you to be there. And you will be respected. I'm not just some person who has this dream. And like, I've put a lot of work into this, and I know what the unique needs are of the community, especially around Christmas. So I'm here for that. And there's so much relationship building in the weeks leading up to Christmas.
Going into some of that, I've seen pictures that you posted about. You actually have to put up some house rules to make sure. To make sure that everyone is I don't know how to phrase it, but everyone's acting correctly or acting in a respectful way towards people, and I think that's important. And I think you're exactly right. Yeah, of course you got to make sure that especially I've got to imagine that this could be a very sensitive and vulnerable time for them, and yeah, they got to make sure that like you said, you're the real deal, and it's not going to be some sneak attack. It's not going to be some intervention or whatever. So.
Oh yeah, no, none of that at all. And they're going to have their, I think pronouns. The trans community is really close to my heart, and so knowing that there's a place where trans folks can come and feel at home and feel respected is a big deal to me. So.
So just to wrap this up, can we talk a little Mormon Insider Baseball?
Yeah.
I am sick of all kinds of Mormons, and it always happens whenever there is a huge, massive Mormon story. So you've got the righteous avengers on the Orthodox side of things, who basically, unless the church is doing everything 100% correctly, whether it's valid or not, they're going to defend it till their dying day, right? Mm-hmm. You've got the ardent ex-Mormons out there who you know what they need? They just need you. Have you read the CES letter? Because if you read that, you'll totally get where we're going with this. So basically the question, so you've got those two types, you've got everything on the internet. The question is this, Geraldine, why can't we have nice things?
I don't know. But I always say that standing in the middle of all that, you just straddle both sides, and both sides just keep punching you in the junk.
Boy, and I tell you, I've really felt that this week after the passing of Thomas S. Monson. You go online and it's just like, holy expletive.
Well, so here's the thing.
Wow. Guys, just take a week. That's what I want to say. Take a week, guys.
Yeah. So podcasting is the the theater of the mind, and boy, is that that's an image. But no, I'm with you, Brian. Like just give it a rest. So, anyways, Geraldine, let's get some plugs out there. So, if people want to learn a little bit more about Dang You to Heck, where can they find it?
At dangyoutoheck.com.
See how easy that is, folks? Dangyoutoheck.com. I mean, this is a phrase that you use daily. Yeah. And if you don't use this phrase daily, you should be.
Yeah. Yep.
I was going to count out the number of keys you'd have to type for one versus the other, but
hey, Geraldine, can you hold that button up again, because when I'm talking, the camera's on me. So.
Oh yeah. Here you go. Can you see that better?
Yeah,
dang you to heck. And that's a manatee with a trumpet.
And tell us how that manatee with a trumpet. I mean, it should be obvious, but for those of us who aren't quite as clever.
Well, there was a period of time where I wanted to name the game More Manatee. But I also don't, like, this guy keeps emailing me, even though I've told him not to contact me anymore. In fact, just today, I responded to another email. So
even after you've changed the name, after you've gotten a new website, he won't let up.
No, he won't let up. And
so dang you to heck is actually directed at him.
Yeah. Well, no, let's not.
Oh, you almost caught her.
You almost caught me. I mean, I also have the URL dangyoutoheckjeff.com, but I'm married to a Jeff, so.
So you've had that for a long time.
Yeah. I'm not sure that you can trademark the name Jeff.
Sadly.
I mean, if you can, it's probably been done by one person.
Well, there's only one Jeff in my
opinion. Yeah. So yeah, dang you to heck. I know, but so it is.
Tell us how'd you come up with a new name? Was this a cloud source, or did you just?
It was just something that I thought up. Yeah. I actually had thought up. For a few days after all this happened, I rage bought a whole bunch of URLs.
Tell us some of the other ones.
Whore manatee.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's a thing.
But like, I don't want to get emails from him. So You also
don't want to get emails from whores.
No, and not manatees who are looking for sex work. So, but I also, what else? Ledge Ginsey. So
I think going with an amalgam of his name is a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
he won't figure that one out.
No, and I honestly, I just need to put him in my rearview mirror, but he refuses to go. It's like he's in my rearview mirror, but there's that little saying at the bottom: objects in mirror may be larger than they appear.
Well, I don't want to intimidate you, but now that you've been on the Mormon News Report podcast and you have the mighty Mormon News Report army behind you, you might be getting another email.
All right, so here's the deal about Jeff Lindsay, though. Let me just tell you a little bit. I mean, I'm not going to tell you about him, but I'm just going to tell you kind of the circles that he runs in, because I do know who the guy is.
Wait, is this some more insider baseball?
Yeah, I'm going to mansplain Jeff Lindsay.
Oh,
so Jeff Lindsay runs. Geraldine's like, yeah, I get this every day. So Jeff Lindsay kind of runs in the Fair Mormon, the kind of the former farms type circles, and his blog is mostly apologetic work. He's had one good blog post like ever, right, in his entire existence of 2004, 2017, and it was actually a pretty clever satire piece on how Joseph Smith and others may have written the Book of Mormon, right? So Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, probably P. Pratt, all these Oliver Cowdery. All these people are conspiring together to write the Book of Mormon, and they talk about the sources. And it's actually it's written out as a dramatic piece, like a play. And it's actually pretty clever. It's pretty funny. It's the one thing that I've ever read from him that I'm like, yeah, I like this. Everything else is just garbage. And so anyway, for him to come in here, particularly, I'm irked, because particularly to come in here and disrupt somebody's livelihood, he has no idea how many of these games Geraldine sells, first of all. He has no idea if she relies on this for a living. He has no idea what else she might do financially to support herself. And to just kind of come in brazenly in the middle of December and say, shut it down, like, work with me a little bit here. Let's just, can we agree on after the Christmas holiday, please? And a person with at least a modicum of humanity would do something like that. So shame on you, Jeff Lindsay, for going after somebody right before Christmas and taking away the potential funding that they could have had for this for your stupid blog. Shame on you.
I was just going to say, that was not only a hot take, but that was a thorough Brian Whitney finger wagging. So
fingers are wagging away.
You have put on notice. You have been put on notice, sir.
Oh, and I know that we have a lot of listeners who side more with kind of the fair Mormon side of things or farm side of things. And that's great. There's a lot of people in that scene that I adore. Jeff Lindsay, you made a fool out of yourself. I was going to use
13, Brian.
So to be fair, after I sent my email to him saying I would shut it all down on January 1st, because I just want to put it behind me, he then started trying to say, do you need more time? Can I give you more time? But at that point, I was done, right? I needed to be. And so
So he was willing to work with you?
He was, well, yes. He was willing to work with me.
And what happened on December 20th?
He says he said that wasn't his. He thought that they would take longer to shut things down.
You're talking about GoDaddy?
Yeah.
And GoDaddy just flip the switch. I mean, they do. They flip the switch fast on stuff. Yeah. So he put in the request again or whatever with them, and they acted on it.
Yeah.
He should have held off on the request.
Yes, he should have. So I hate giving him credit, but I do want to give him credit that he was willing to work out a longer, but he kept trying to make demands. Like, I need you to put verbiage on your website that I own the trademark to the name and I'm only allowing you to use it. And you're not allowed to call your game Mormanity. He kept trying to put down new rules on me. And
so he wanted all that on there while you were still considering whether or not to change the name or just in the interim. At that point, I was just like, I don't have it in me to fight this. Mm-hmm. I spoke to 3 different attorneys, and every attorney I spoke to, it's funny because when you post on Facebook that there's a legal problem around the name, they start thinking, all these attorneys start thinking it's Cards Against Humanity or the Mormon Church that are going after you, and they're all excited to get on board. And then when they find out it's a blog known as Mormanity, they're like, not just a blog, but a blogspot.com blog guy.
There's no interest whatsoever. But all of those attorneys said he has no case and you would win. So, and if you want to go forward with this, you would win.
But he caught you at a vulnerable moment.
Well, he doesn't seem to have any respect for what the actual law is around trademark issues. I mean, he doesn't understand. I mean, Yamaha pianos versus Yamaha motorcycles, right? It's not the same company. Mm-hmm. No one's confused. You're not walking into a piano dealership and expecting to walk out with a motorcycle.
Although I did last week, and they looked at me really funny.
Okay. Don't make his case for him, Brian.
I'm kidding.
Excuse me, sir. I thought you had pianos here, not motorcycles. I am.
So, but I just every day I have probably 30 emails from him in under a month.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's been a little obsessive about this.
And I just don't, and I just don't want to fight. Like I fight so many things on a constant basis that he's not worth my fight. So.
Well, Dang You to Heck is a dang good name, a dang good website, dangyoutoheck.com. Thank you. I was going to say, you wouldn't want to do a .org on something like this. dangyoutoheck.com. Buy the game, for crying out loud, for flipping crying out loud. Buy the game because it's hilarious. You're going to have fun. Your family's going to have fun. Your friends are going to have fun. Their Mormon neighbors are going to have fun. Everybody needs to lighten up, not take themselves so seriously. I think, Jeff Lindsay, you should buy 200 copies of this game.
So, Geraldine, if people want to get in touch with you, they can find it at dangyoutoheck.com.
Yes, they can.
And is there any other way for, if people want to support what your initiatives that you do with the LGBTQ plus community, is there any way that they can help financially support you in this? Is there a website or anything like that? We
just got approval for nonprofit status for my program Queer Meals.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You can go to queermeals.com for information on that. We're still updating the website there about that because we just got it this last week.
I'm glad you didn't go with Queer Meals on Wheels because you would have gotten some emails about that too.
I tell you, everything makes me so nervous now. I understand Prince a whole lot when he went to a symbol.
Yeah, right. He's like, that's it. Screw it. I'm just doing it. Yeah, because every prince from between here and Saudi Arabia was emailing, that's my name.
Right? So there's that. And what we do with that is we feed people in Provo, queer folks in Provo, provide them with a safe place to hang out. and then we just sort of keep tabs on people who need keeping tabs on. And, we deliver meals to people who don't feel like leaving their homes, or deliver groceries to people who don't feel like leaving their homes because of anxiety or whatever. And we've got some other stuff happening in the next year now that we have nonprofit status. So
What was that website again?
queermeals.com.
Queermeals.com, and then dengyoutoheck.com. And you were also recently in the news too for
Safe Christmas?
your Safe Christmas, right? Exactly.
Not the arrest.
And then you were in the news before that for the Bake Off.
Oh yeah, I was.
Yeah. So tell us real quick about that, and then we'll let you go.
For let's see, Safe Christmas, you can go to Safe Christmas, safexmas.org, I think is the information for Safe Christmas. And then the Bake Off was just the big gay bake sale.
I think that's what it was called, right? The Big Gay Bake Sale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it got some press. It seemed to do very well.
Yes, it did get some national press. It was kind of exciting. So
awesome. So dengyoutoheck.com, safexmas.com, and you can find all of her contact information on those websites. Geraldine, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a blast. We're going to have to, you know what? I think we need to have you come on a little bit more. How's that?
I will bring the drink.
We get a little crazy up here.
Bring the heavy stuff. I've got water.
There you go. And we'll talk, and we will be right back with more news and information.
All right. Bye.
So, speaking of all things wonderful, new games, new books, and new things that people can fill their minds with now that they've depleted themselves through Christmas spending, Greg Koford Books is an independent book publisher that specializes in Mormon history, theology, philosophy, scripture, and other genres. Greg Koford Books has won more awards than any independent book publisher in Mormon studies, and they are pleased to offer Mormon News Report listeners a 15% discount on their website, which is gregkoford.com. Simply enter the word News Report, all one word and all capital letters, into the discount box at checkout to receive your 15% off. Just a reminder, orders over $50 qualify for free shipping in the U.S., domestic shipping, and local area customers in the Wasatch Front are welcome to stop by the office in Sandy to pick up their orders directly to avoid shipping at all. Their next scheduled release for January 30th is Whom Say Ye That I Am? Lessons from the Jesus of Nazareth by James and Judith McConkie. This book looks at the historical Jesus in his social and cultural setting and contrasts his interaction with individuals, particularly those on the margins of society, and institutions. And spoiler alert, he was a lot nicer to individuals. For Latter-day Saints, this is a look at the life of Jesus in a way that is rarely discussed in Sunday school. Whom Say Ye That I Am is now available for pre-order on gregkoford.com. That's spelled out as GREGKOFFORD.com. The 15% discount would apply to a pre-order as well. Remember, just enter News Report, all caps, all one word, to get that 15% off for our wonderful Mormon News Report listeners.
And now for your moment in history, courtesy of our friends at todayinmormonhistory.com. 55 years ago this week on January 4th, 1963. In January 1963, the first presidency announced, quote, "We deplore the presumption of some politicians, especially officers, coordinators, and members of the John Birch Society who undertake to align the church or its leadership with their political views." This was a not too subtle reference to Benson's son, Reed, the Utah Birch coordinator.
So for listeners who aren't quite as familiar with what the John Birch Society was, loosely, it was kind of like the Tea Party movement of its day. It's very libertarian-leaning, very populist in its views. Feels kind of soft compared to some of the movements that are going on today, like kind of the Breitbart alt-right type stuff.
Yeah, I'd say it's more like the Tea Party, how the Tea Party originally used to be. They were very, I would almost say they were very almost fundamentalist in what they wanted to get back to.
Let's say pre-Koch brothers Tea Party.
There you go. Yeah.
Before
the Treaty thing.
But I just changing the wording around on this real quick. Let's just say let's replace John Birch Society with Republican Party. All right. We deplore the presumption of some politicians, especially officers, coordinators, and members of the Republican Party, who undertake to align the church or its leadership with their political views. Hits a little closer to home when we read it that way, don't it, Brant?
Isn't that interesting? And that is our show. We'd like to thank the legend herself, Geraldine Hasselpool, for joining us tonight. Make sure to check out her game, Dang You to Heck, wherever you can find it at dangyoutoheck.com or anywhere else you see it. Also, check out safexmas.com as well. She does great work among the LGBTQ plus community around Christmas time. Really, I'm really proud of her for it. Be sure to check out the rest of the shows available at theculturalhall.com. That's our sister station, the one that sponsors us, the one that helps us to get this stuff out hot and fresh every Monday morning. For example, here's an interview that people might be interested in. They interviewed Sam Young, the main proponent for abolishing Bishop Youth Worthiness interviews. A very interesting interview. Music for today's show was provided by Scott Holmes.
And just a little quick update on our iTunes and Patreon accounts here. So we're up to 12 reviews on iTunes. It's been kind of sitting there for a while. We're trying to hit 20. The reason that we want that magic number is because that's when iTunes really starts including us. When people just search the word Mormon in iTunes for under podcasts, that's when we'll start showing up, is when there's about 20 reviews or plus. That's kind of the algorithm that they use. So, folks, we're going to keep begging you for those reviews until we hit 20, and then we'll let off of the gas pedal a little bit.
We're getting close. We're getting there.
We're getting there. 8 more reviews, folks. 8 more. Please be one of those 8. Help us get to that level so that we don't have to keep coming back every week and asking you. We have 14 patrons who are subscribing for a total of $28 per month. Thank you very much. We have some generous patrons who go above the $1 that we ask. Our goal for patrons is to get $55 a month. And the reason we want to get $55 a month is so that we can go on Facebook Live. The software that we use to record this charges $55 a month for you to be able to do webinars through social media. And so that's what we're trying to hit it for.
Well, the nice thing about Facebook Live too is it's easy to watch on your phone. For example, if it's a Sunday night, you're on the East Coast, you're getting ready for bed, you want to watch a little bit of, hey, you and your wife, you want to watch a little bit of the Mormon News Report podcast, why not? But the other nice thing too is it allows people to be interactive on a live basis. So who knows? Maybe we wrap up the show, we do a little bit of Q&A afterwards, Brian. I don't know. We'll see.
Right. Plus, people can send comments while we're talking, and we can read them and try to respond to them live.
Absolutely. As always, if you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can email us at mail@mormonnewsreport.com. Hit us up on Twitter @TheMormonNews. You can find us on Facebook. Send us a message there. Or this new little fangled thing called voicemail. You could call us at 801-987-0192. One more time, 801-987-0192. You can call us. You text us. It's up to you. The take is hot enough, we'll play it on the air next week. We will be back next week with more news, commentary, and interviews with a little bit of snark. Until then, we'll talk to you again after a while.